We're good to go.
Oh, yeah. Cool.
Okay, this is our briefing, Simplification Local Government Strategic Communication. I'm really looking forward to this. This is to enable council discussion and input into a draft communication strategy that has been developed in the context of simplification for local government. This is about our next steps. We've talked a lot about our summit and all the work that we've done at the moment, but this is really trying to find those next steps and having a good conversation amongst us as council as to about where we want to go with that. So we've got Patrick, Lindsay and Megan. I understand Megan has been working all night on this. Thank you so much, Megan, for bringing this forward and fitting into our moving schedule. As you know, local government at the moment is extraordinary and urgent at times. I'm glad that we've been able to put this together. So thank you. Over to you.
Kia ora, thank you. I'll just provide a bit of context to bring us from where we are today compared to the briefing last week, and then I'll hand over to Megan for most of the conversation. So you remember Thursday last week, we discussed Council's position on the Simplifying Local Government Head Start process. And one component in that briefing that we didn't get to is how the position around facilitating and enabling that you came to could be articulated through a communication strategy. Which is sort of looking at a communication strategy that looks over our entire environment of change and transition. So as Chair Swiggs mentioned, we've taken this as an opportunity to have that kōrero that we missed last week now. And we've put this together very, very quickly. Megan's put this together very quickly in order to capitalise on that opportunity. And I'm very happy to have Megan with me to lead you through that work. Noting that this is a workshop as opposed to just a briefing, we were intending to have a couple of breakout conversations to ensure you've all got a diversity of ways to engage rather than just sitting around the room. Chair Swiggs, are you comfortable with us managing that from this side of things? Are you happy?
This is your time. You use it how you want to use it.
Kezi pai, thank you. And there'll be no sticky dots required. So. I can get you some sticky dots, Councillor, if you'd like, but they won't be useful for this conversation. All that said, I'll hand over to Megan to take you through. Thank you all.
Kia ora koutou. Thank you very much for having me here again. Yes, I was up late last night, but it's all right. I have a skin full of caffeine, so I should be able to keep the energy levels up. Good to hear it. Welcome to have this discussion around communications and the strategy around it. Now, this is, every time I say strategy, it is draft, because what you say is going to inform this. And I just want to point out that the work we're doing today is the strategy, so it's the overlying work that will inform a plan. The plan is where the actions fall out of. But we will talk about actions at the end, and we can have a discussion around the sort of things that you might like to do and that we as staff can support you to do to reach your audience, which we're also going to talk about. As Patrick said, we're going to have some activities, which I know you're all enthusiastically looking forward to. I know they're sitting there. I'll hand some stuff out as we go. So, first slide. The purpose of us gathering here today is to get your insights and feedback so that you can help us develop a communication strategy that reflects Council's direction. Now, as I say, I have written a draft, some draft ideas. They are only draft. I want to hear your views as we go, because you are the ones that will tell us and enable us to enact any sort of communications that we put out. At the heart of this strategy, I've just realised I've put everything in on my notes in size 14, and actually I still need my glasses. I've got to... that's better. At the heart of the strategy, it's really just a simple idea that while governance structures may change, Canterbury's communities will continue to rely on essential regional services every day, and our communications need to keep the focus on those services and the outcomes that they deliver. So that's kind of the crux of what I have put into the draft, and hopefully I've heard you right, and we'll discuss that as we go along. have covered everything there, I think. So why the strategy matters now? Obviously, it's in response to the government reforms, to simplifying local government. Our focus is turning towards what comes next, as the chair explained. And we have some key challenges, including how we help decision makers of post this time, stakeholders and communities understand that the important question is not who governs these functions, but whether they continue to be delivered effectively and what appropriate scale that may be. One way we can do this is clear, consistent messaging, which is what I'm going to try and get us discussing about today. I want to make sure that before we get into the workshopping, that the sort of around the purpose of today's discussion is not about achieving perfect agreement. I'm not sure we would or should do that. And it's not telling anyone what they can or can't think. We are looking for unified, not uniform. And it's important that you as councillors continue to have your own views, represent your constituencies and hold those views with respect and integrity for the others sitting around this table. So that's your first lesson for the day. If we can continue like that, then I think we'll all come out of this pretty happy. Hopefully we can agree on some sort of core statements that will ultimately help protect the credibility of this organisation and make it easier for our stakeholders and communities to understand the position of this council. This is the framework that we'll be working under. So starting with a positioning statement, which is what we stand for. It's just one statement, and this is focusing the communications and some supporting points which sit underneath that. So why that positioning statement is important and why it matters. Some strategic objectives, what we will do to, what we will actually achieve, and then the actions, what we're going to do to achieve those strategic objectives, which I know some of you are already doing. And that's the other thing to note, that I have worked with you for more than 6 months now, and every single one of you has been enacting some of these actions, which makes my job very easy. So thank you for making me look good. And we'll talk about some other actions today that you might like to pick up or that we can support you with. I should remember to keep looking at my notes to make sure I'm not missing. Yeah, sure. Please do feel free to ask questions.
Yeah, I'm just looking at that thinking, where's the feedback loop? Is there any way to feed back up to positioning statements if the actions are or aren't working? I mean, because I feel like a lot of what we do, we miss that feeding back and then adjusting.
Positioning statement can change and does change. So when I first started here, our positioning statement, or rather the focus of the strategy that I was working towards, was actually getting information out about councillors remaining until the end of October 2028. We got that. So now we're moving to the next phase. And the next phase, or the focus of what we're looking at for this strategy, is or what I'm presenting or suggesting is around those essential regional functions, and that's what the focus will be there. There are all sorts of different communications plans and strategies that will fall out of that. Actions should feed back into strategic objectives, so there should be measurable actions that come out of that. And so the loop is probably for each strategy, for each plan, the loop goes back to the strategic objectives. Did you achieve it? Is it achieving your positioning statement and your aims? So that's the loop back, the feedback. And yeah, definitely debriefing at each step of the way to make sure. So as I say, I've been here for about 6 months, and I've been sitting listening to you, the wallflower. It's not often I'm a wallflower, so it's been a nice experience. And listening to your conversations and the themes and the sort of key points that you have all generally agreed on. And so here are some of those observations. And I've also pulled together a lot of the different collateral, the different documents and things, and had a look and tested what I've heard against that. And I think I've got a fairly good list here, but very keen to hear your thoughts. So first and foremost, that you all care about Canterbury. And that's really obvious, including its people, the environment and the economy, and that communities are at the centre of that. What's best for the whole region and the environment, not necessarily the individuals, because obviously that's the territorials have been looking at the territorial authorities, been looking at the districts, and our whole reason is to look wider. As Patrick talked to you last week in the briefing, it's around being neutral around form. That's what we've heard. I've heard a really strong sense from you that it should remain neutral around the future governance structures, and that we're here to facilitate and support. We heard neutral but interested was quite a neat little turn of phrase, and that you don't want to necessarily tell territorial authorities how to submit around the Head Start. But I've also heard a real passion around the function and what it is that we have been delivering here and what we believe should continue to be delivered here in this organisation, and that you want those essential functions to continue into the future of Canterbury for the betterment of Canterbury, and it doesn't really matter who governs it as long as they are conducted at a scale that works for them. Which segues nice into delivery at scale. So one of the best statements I've come across is that pests and floods don't respect boundaries. In fact, I might have even made it. No, I didn't make it up. But that is a classic. Pests don't stop at the boundary. The wallabies don't stop jumping, and so we need to make sure that we are considering which boundaries they're jumping over and that they're managed across those.
I think a classic example of this is just in the last week with the Corfi, not the Corfi. What's the other river, Ian? The Conway River. That's partly in Hurunui and partly in the Kaikoura district, and that district separation, if it was a regional separation, would have a different way that would have to manage that.
Thank you. And flooding and pests are such a great example, but there are other examples we have as well of functions that we have that go across boundaries that I don't need to preach to you, because you all know that better than I do, probably. Long-term outcomes. So we're future focused. That's one of our guiding principles, and supporting readiness for reform. Of course, environmental and fiscal stewardship. We had a great discussion around that in the strategic direction, ensuring that fiscally and environmentally responsible was sitting under one of our guiding principles, which is how we make decisions. Mana whenua partnership and our dedication to te tiriti has come through loud and clear, and also data and systems, and making sure that we have evidence-based and really good evidence to inform our decisions. And of course, as I just referenced, this document, and the kaupapa that went behind it, the strategic direction, which is oozing with the vibe that will ensure good decision making, if I may quote someone
you've
famous.
Used that word. Nettles, your enthusiasm is oozing into the staff.
Yeah, oozing. So these are the sort of documents where you've already told us what it is that where your focus sits, the principles that could inform decision making, which is part of the Head Start. We're not saying that these have unanimous agreement by any means, but they do reflect a number of the good things that you or indeed the central government have said, and they are important in this process. And these are not necessarily being considered at the conversations to date around simplifying local government. So keep in mind to some of these really good aspects of what generally I've heard around this council table. So pulling all of that together, I have come up with a draft positioning statement, and it's not perfect, and the whole point of it is to elicit some feedback from you and to get you discussing it. So this is the gist of what, and I know this is really focused, and it should be. A positioning statement describes how you want to be perceived, and it's focused on what this strategy is that we're doing. So our focus is on ensuring the essential regional functions that Canterbury depends on are successfully carried forward into whatever governance arrangements come next. So first and foremost, I'm really keen to hear whether this captures your intent, the intent that you have. Is it the right foundation for future messaging on this strategy for the next few months? Needs to be clear and simple, focuses on continuity and stewardship rather than self-preservation. It avoids advocating for a particular governance model, which is what I heard last week from you, and instead it communicates that there are functions, or at least some functions in Canterbury, that we can't afford to lose or weaken. So keen to hear from you.
Councillor Faulkner.
Thank you. Excuse me. Thank you, Megan. I was just sitting there and I was thinking about it. Earlier conversation this morning at council only time, and some of the intense conversations that are going on in the community at the moment. And I know in the past, on the zone committee, we had some conversations with people, and they were absolutely passionate about their point of view, and they were so passionate that there is a tendency to dismiss the whole argument. And I wondered whether somewhere in our thinking we can have a philosophy where everybody's got a point. It doesn't matter how badly it is articulated. Everybody's got a little granule of a point in what they're upset about, and it's identifying that and somehow distilling that conversation into a sort of reframing where we take it out. And I think that's part of what we should be doing as well, recognising, because I think we could be in danger of dismissing a whole range of opinions otherwise.
Any other comments on this? Councillor Gerard?
Just a question to Councillor Faulkner. Are you saying that we should actually first talk about our gripes with what we think is the problem of regional council and start that as a starting point? Or
No, I'm not talking about us. I'm talking about the...
I mean, what we hear, the gripes that we hear from our communities as a starting point.
I'm coming from a perspective that I've got a bias in iwi relationships. I want to see those get solidified down at an on ground level, so there's better processes between farming and iwi, and there's other parties that see the current process as problematic, and there's quite a bit of passion about that. But I think we're talking about the same problem, but we're just going across purposes. So it's recognising that and working our way through, but we do it in so many different conversations, whether it's the coastal policy statement or whatever. Some of us, we'd have a tendency to switch off. So it's recognising those individual points that they are relevant. And somewhere in that, I think we can somehow have our philosophy around that.
Councillor Moody.
Yeah, I think this is a really good statement at first reading. Yep, I really like it. Well done.
Councillor Megan Mackay. And then I'll come to you, Councillor Davis.
Kia ora. I just wanted to say I think this is a really good, strong overarching message. I think it does focus on what is legitimately our interests in local government reform. It focuses on protecting any outcomes for Canterbury and also any critical regional functions. I like that it actually talks about supporting orderly, kind of indicating that we want to have some orderly transition in there, regardless of whatever governance model's chosen next. The only wording, and I don't like wordsmithing, so I'm not absolutely hooked on it, but the word successfully carried forward does feel a little bit passive, but overall I just support this. This is a really good direction.
Any further? Andrea and then Peter.
Peter and I are playing around with words, I have to admit. I just put, because I'm thinking, how am I going to remember this? So I'm saying, I want to say, we're determined at Environment Canterbury that the essential regional functions are carried forward into the future. I mean, that's what I would say to someone, but we don't have to do that, but I'm just, yeah.
You're effectively saying the same thing.
It's exactly the same.
Yeah.
And you can say it
Yeah, you don't have to verbatim go, oh, that's my script. Hey, this is all I'm allowed to say. Yeah, and that's not going to happen. But it's a guiding Matariki star. Peter.
A bit more direct, I guess, in terms of that statement. It says the things I guess we need to say, but I would be shortening it down a bit to saying the essential regional functions that Canterbury depends on are protected in any new governance arrangements, because I think that's what we're saying. Not carried forward. We don't carry them forward at all. Because carrying them forward means that you can still change. I mean, I'm saying that some of those things, until we actually get a semblance of what any new TA territorial boundaries look like, then there's going to be a requirement for somebody to act like the adult in the room and protect the things that we need protecting. And I think the sooner that, and I know that people don't agree with me on this, but the sooner we get some sort of business case to recognise that, and that central government can understand that there is some really strong thinking here, it's just all words. It's words. Anyway, I'm not going to die in the hole over that statement, but
it's a good point. I'm just thinking in my mind, because carry forward is, for me, there is going from what Peter is saying, there is a element that the legislation is going to carry those things forward anyway. They still need to be delivered. Genevieve?
I think it is good, but it's not quite prescriptive enough, in my opinion. I think we do need to be quite brutal in what we say, because it's, land, freshwater, and coastal, and even the graphics show rivers and mountains, but no one actually, when you talk to them, understands the coastal environment, and I'm so sick of bringing it up. But it's true. The catchment is one thing, but we've got to identify what that catchment involves, because really people don't understand. And bringing that forward needs to happen in whatever shape or form.
Councillor Sunkel?
Thanks. I'm with Peter Scott in just being very succinct in the absolutes, and I look at the Te Kahika document, and it's 100 and something pages, and Dion says she's a great document, and I go, oh Jesus. I've read it, and it is a good document, but the simpler we can make things, just put into simple bites, I think that the more it resonates. But I guess in this conversation, I'm a bit of the stick in the mud. I go, what are we trying to achieve by this? There are probably 11 working days between now and TAs having to identify what the future might look like. So what is it we're trying to achieve, and what are we trying to influence in the next fortnight? And I just wonder what we will influence in the next fortnight. So it's a question as to, I absolutely understand what we want to achieve, been promoting those absolute views from the get-go, but what is it we are going to achieve in the next 2 weeks before those announcements are made, and who do we believe we could influence in that next 2 weeks? That's just a question in my mind.
Thank you, Councillor Sunkel. I hadn't considered the next 2 weeks. This is actually, the consideration for this was actually probably more to the end of the year, as longer term. The next 2 weeks will happen, and that's the idea of what I've heard you all say, is that it's not about the form, that will happen. It's about the function and how we then ensure that there is understanding that these essential functions need to continue in whatever way. And so that is the strategy behind here is actually more about the function, function rather than the form.
No, that's fine, and that explanation. I just have a picture in my mind that if entities make a decision as to their future, they will be making their decisions and their thoughts, and I just wonder how much influence our thoughts might be, how much they will take on board once they have made their decisions to go forward. If the lack of conversation to date is a guide to what might happen once they firm up their thinking. I'm not trying not to be negative in it. I'm just how much do we invest in a conversation where every ear is turned the other way? That's just my question.
So I think
I
the
don't
CE
say we shouldn't, but I'm just...
The CE is going to say something. I want to say something as well. The one thing I would like to say is there is the next 2 weeks, absolutely, that's going to fall where that's going to fall. I think that is quite predetermined, and well, not predetermined is not the right word. It's quite determinative of the TAs. They're going to do that, and I don't think we're going to necessarily influence that any further. But there is the time between when that happens and when the government may or may not make announcements. And there is also the 2 years after that around when the form and the further work that will need to happen around the more detailed work, potentially, if we are in a head start, or the 5 years following about how we work through with our communities about what they may want to expect in their future local governance arrangements. So I think there's multi-levels here that I think just being on top of and getting ahead of the game so that we're not chasing the tail, which I'm sick of doing, for me is a good thing. Stephanie?
I'll leave it at that.
Sarah and then Ian?
So the toolkit tool, I think, is really useful. It's quite a long document of it. That's the one you're talking about, isn't it? So, and I think there's some very valid points in there. And is that a tool that is going to be pushed out? Has it been pushed out quickly to the TAs? Chair?
I have shared it with the TA mayors. It is not in a final form. It will be released next week or the week after at Te Uru Kahika's plenary. I've shared it with you all, and I've encouraged the TA mayors to share it with their councils as well, notwithstanding it is not yet officially launched from Te Uru Kahika.
Can you let us know when it's launched, and are we able to talk about it to other TA councillors?
Absolutely. It's the intention to have it out now is so that this can be talked about,
Right.
and it's just a timing thing about the plenary that Te Uru Kahika is doing with the regional sector, all of the regional councils and unitary councils across the country. Is this next week, is it, or the week after? I think it's the week after.
So we can use it.
We can use it, talk about it. It's good information that
It is.
if you're talking to people, just share that out. As I said, I've shared it with the mayors and the encouraging them to share it with their TA councillors.
Could you make a note then, just one alteration within the Harbour Master? This document talks about the Harbour Master being all about harbours on the coast, and that may well be the view in Bay of Plenty when they've wrote it, but for Canterbury and the rest, Harbour Master has a whole bunch of different roles other than just coastal and port. So
lakes.
I saw that sitting in the.
point.
If you could, if there's opportunity.
Forward, no problem.
Thank you.
Okay, who was next? It was Ian and then Nettles. Sorry, Nettles.
I was just going to say, I thought this draft positioning statement was perfect, and you could spend the next, by asking 16 people a different opinion. For different opinions, we could spend 2 weeks debating it. The meaning of it wouldn't change, so stick with what you've got, I think.
Nettles.
it may be because I'm dressed like a snow leopard that you didn't notice me for the last 15 minutes going like this. But.
I'm making my way around.
The statement, I think we can all agree, has the vibe of what we all innately think. What does success mean with this? Is it the elevator pitch? I think it is. That's the elevator pitch. Some of us may need help with wordsmithing, some may not, but we're not going to have it in our mind word for word. I think if we can agree that's the pitch, or not a pitch, that's our intent, that's our vibe, that's what we feel, that's what is important to us, that's a really good start.
Deputy Chair.
I don't feel the vibe at all. Unfortunately, no vibe there. Nā kia ora Megan, tēnā koe. Thank you for your mahi. It encapsulates, I think, what was discussed last week. Is probably I kind of concur with Peter Scott and John just on protecting moving forward and just future arrangements. One word I don't really like in there is whatever. But other than that, I think you've got it there. And just on kind of John's point, as we heard from this morning, that the RMA reforms probably won't get through or won't get through. So things keep changing all the time. So this is not just for 2 weeks, but for a longer term. Kia ora.
Councillor Robinson and then Gerard.
Just going back to my comments before, it's not in the toolkit either, the coastal element. So it needs to be resurrected in there. And I don't know if that's the intention of government, but I think we need to have someone do it going forward. Because, it talks about water and catchments and land and all that, but... Pardon? Oh.
Councillor Gerard.
Yeah, I just with the intention of the statement, I'm just wondering whether the intent is to have essential regional functions remain regional, because I can see if we're all going to be unitary councils that the services will become unitary, more broken down into smaller units and not be regional. So it's really how do you keep them regional, because that's about the scale and catchments and all those things that the toolkit talk about.
Thank you, Councillor Gerard. I think that's the essence of what we're talking about here, is that the aim for this comms strategy and the council wider is ensuring that people making decisions and people influencing decisions understand at what level, at what scope these functions need to occur. And they may be catchment based, they may be across 2 districts, whatever, and that's what this is about. So I think you've probably captured it perfectly, the idea.
Excellent. I think that's a good discussion there. I think, I wrote down some, I don't like wordsmithing, but I just said, based on what Peter was saying, the essential services Canterbury rely on must keep working well without interruption at the scale that can best fit the job. It is exactly encapsulated in there anyway, so let's not sort of get too hung up on that. But I think if we can tighten it, there might be some opportunities there.
Thank you. I will. I'll take it away. And you're all such good students that the next activity was actually to get you to do exactly that. So in the interest of time, we'll actually whip past this one. It was going to be the pub test, so I know you would have liked that, some of you, but it was literally the elevator pitch, which Councillor Lamont was talking about. So I've heard quite a few elevator pitches just now. And I've taken notes.
I did that too.
Yeah.
I fell into your trap.
You're welcome. So I'll take that away. I'll simplify it and make it tighter so that it's an easier one to remember. But 2, I think it was Councillor Davis said, put it into your own words, because that way it's natural and it's the pitch. So we'll skip over that one. And I do like the sound of my own voice, so we'll just keep going, shall we? Now we're moving on to supporting points. And so these are, I'll flick through my notes. So these are why the positioning statement matters. That they sort of explain what must be preserved. There's some of the things that you just spoke about. They represent the outcomes that we believe must be protected, regardless of whatever governance model is adopted. So together, these make the framework on which we can develop key messaging. So I haven't put key messages up there with the idea that if you use these or whatever we decide, these will be good, of these or others, that you develop the key messaging that fits into these. So essential regional services are delivered well, at scale with the right outcomes, measured by the right data, done in the right way for Canterbury. Our communities must continue to receive effective regional services regardless of future governance arrangements. So you can see how that kind of key messaging can be pulled from each of these supporting points. Maintain integrated regional decision making. Regional systems are interconnected. They need coordinated planning and investment at a catchment scale. And I know catchment scale has been brought through all of the discussion. Not everything will be at catchment scale. Obviously, public transport isn't at catchment scale. And so that's why I've tended to talk about scale, appropriate scale, rather than necessarily catchment. But I understand what you mean when you talk about catchment, for flooding and other levels of sort of geographic area. Canterbury's biggest challenges don't stop at those district boundaries, and effective decisions rely on trusted data, technical expertise and evidence gathered across the whole region. Avoid fragmentation of services across district boundaries. Reform should strengthen outcomes for communities rather than fragment services. Support efficient and cost-effective service delivery. Regional core services like public transport, flood protection, biosecurity, water management, emergency management, they work best when planned and delivered at that regional or catchment or scope or scale. Enable long-term environmental, economic and community outcomes. The long-term environmental and community, economic and community outcomes must remain at the centre of reform decisions. And actually that's something, Councillor Sunkel, to your question before about, what are we going to do in the next 2 weeks? The Head Start submissions that will be going forward on August 9 may not have a lot of detail. It's unlikely they'll have a lot of detail around these sort of functions. And so I guess it would be fantastic if we could ensure that our territorial authority partners understand that they need to look at these at some point, and that probably fairly soon, but that they're important to have on there and be signalled. Am I right in saying that? Uphold partnerships with mana whenua. Mana whenua partnerships should remain an important part of future governance arrangements. And to Councillor Faulkner's point before, that obviously needs some discussion around how we are going to, around some of those key functions. Again, all of these, it's about being unified, not uniform.
Councillor Scott?
Yeah, I think one of the things that we possibly need to think about also is that these generic services are across all regional councils, not just ours. I mean, we are making a case for a continuation of function in some sort of entity, but we've also had conversations about, or heard conversations, especially from the kaiwhakahare, about the takiwā. And the opportunity across the takiwā. We've had previous conversations with the West Coast, with Southland and Otago, and so I think if this is being portrayed as a model, it can be also portrayed as a generic model. There's still the opportunity, I think, to speak to the kaiwhakahare maybe about the takiwā and how they see that. Let's get away from the I shouldn't say the weeds, but the weeds that are getting us in the way at the moment. And let's have a higher level conversation about this, because it does have some generic performance across what we try and protect, which is the South Island.
You just had a thumbs up from Councillor Moody there.
Which does include Nelson, Tasman and Marlborough. They're part of the South Island. That's where we get all our trains from. Who was next? I saw a hand come up. Councillor Gerard.
I'm just in agreement with Peter.
Well, those Walding Pines in the Awatere Valley would beg to differ. Who else had a hand up? I'm sure I saw one. No, so if you want to keep going.
So moving on to draft strategic objectives. And so these are what you want to achieve and what success looks like. Again, these are just drafts, and I've put that in capitals there, so you know that's the whole point of this discussion today. But support good outcomes from Canterbury around local government reform, provide information for decision makers, maintain confidence among stakeholders, mana whenua perspectives are valued, and Canterbury Regional Council is a trusted source. So those are some strategic objectives that I thought we could refer back to, and this is where their loop was that Councillor Davis was talking about before, is how do we loop back and make sure that we're achieving what we want to achieve, and some of these, if we can hook our communications on this and measure against these. So keen to hear what you think of these. I've got some sort of further explanation if you'd like it, but
who wants to start us off on this piece? I think one of the I'll come back to you, Peter. But one thing that I immediately thought of is, what does good mean? And that's the bit that I think probably need to just dig into a little bit better. What does good look like if you're just doing good outcomes? But anyway, that's my 2 cents worth. Peter?
Well, I think that somewhere along the line we need to get away from bullet points, and we need to start having a coherent conversation about what we're talking about in terms of a form. So what are we talking about in terms of trying to protect, in terms of function? What does that look like? Where could that possibly sit? Is that, and I think that we probably need to check somewhere along the line with ministers about, is this the relevant conversation that you're interested in trying to inform what reform looks like? We've all said that we accept reform, and reform's going to happen. We don't have a say on that. But we've also been pretty strong and spoken for a long, long time about our function. But that's all we're talking about, the function. What would that look like? Where will it sit? How would it be governed? What's the longevity of it? And
what's the efficiency?
What's the business case for it? Yes.
The efficiency, the business, yeah. Councillor Robinson.
Yes, Genevieve is fine. The two words objectives and maintain don't actually go together, I don't think. I just think that with regards to confidence, I think in some elements of what we do, we're not quite there yet. So I think it would be a really good objective to achieve confidence amongst all stakeholders, and that we're a trusted source of information and science type thing. And then I think the rest flows from that. That's where the confidence comes from.
Councillor Mackay?
A question of clarity on this. Apologies for not being here at the front, but can I just check that the strategic objectives relate to the local government reform rather than us at this stage?
They relate to you insofar as this is what, or this section is what I would am asking councillors what you want to achieve, what success looks like for you. But these are around the support or influence, if I want to use that word, where we want to head with our communications. In the context of local government reform, yes.
So it does become quite confusing when you look at the bullet point that Councillor Robinson's just talked about maintaining confidence among stakeholders, because that confidence needs to be maintained across the whole region.
So if I can perhaps look to my notes and what I had there, as I've got maintain confidence among stakeholders, communities, partners and staff that essential regional services will continue throughout the reform process. So sorry, I should have probably read them out.
One thing, can I pick up on something just that you were saying there, Claire? I've just kind of been writing down here a couple of things. They're kind of bunched up together, and I'll come to everybody else's things, but I find these a little bit bunched up together. And really, for me, it came down to three core objectives here, which was decision quality, continuity and confidence, and influence through evidence. And everything then pops out of those, because rather than specifically pointing out any sort of one side of anything, and I mean, that's just an opinion that I have, but it kind of makes it very clear we've got three core objectives, and everything else would pop out of those, and they may become more something else underneath each of those core objectives, because otherwise it feels like it's a little bit mixed. That's just my personal view, and others may have different opinions onto that. I'm going to go to Councillor Moody, Councillor Mackay, and then Councillor Faulkner.
Thank you. Is this the part of the workshop where we'd be thinking about what we can do, as as councillors, to get that understanding out there into the community to support the good outcomes of Canterbury's LG reform?
Thank you, Councillor Moody. We have I have a slide coming up around the activities, the specific activities that that we can look at, which I think is what you were asking there.
I'll hold off to then with great excitement. Cheers.
Good work, Councillor Moody. You were keen. Councillor Mackay.
Kia ora. So it's always good that we as staff have done a great deal of the thinking and putting forward things for us to really work on the words, because it means that the job's halved for us. From my perspective, I think this heads in the right direction. My only observation is it feels a bit like a mixture of strategic objectives, actions, and desired outcomes. And an example is provide information for decision making. Sounds more like an action, but Canterbury Regional Council as a trusted source feels like an outcome. And so I wondered whether it would be stronger if we could put all five expressed into some type of consistent, genuinely strategic language focused on what we're trying to achieve rather than the how we will achieve it. That's my feedback. But again, it is really wordsmithing.
That's a really good point, Councillor Mackay, because that's kind of where I was heading with what I was. But you're far more eloquent in the way that you express your words in this. So I appreciate that. It's good. Councillor Faulkner.
I'm just looking at the confidence among stakeholders and then the trusted source wording, and sometimes those two are not compatible. That who do you want to be a trusted source for? At times we could have local, regional or national as being who we're trying to influence and be a trusted source. And there's a conflict because I think quite often in conversations you could be a source of good information for one party but a conflict with another party, so probably need to determine on who the trusted source is.
Councillor Davis.
So I looked up objective versus goal. So the goal is protecting these essential services, right, for Canterbury. And then they say, this is co-pilot, objectives are specific measurable actions or steps taken to achieve the goal. So if that's the goal, we want to protect these things. So what are the three things that Dion said? So it's influencing through evidence, open and neutral information, and preparing our fellow decision makers. Are those objectives, these three steps to achieving the goal? I don't know. But I think 3 is a great idea because it's just simpler.
And everything else will fall through that, like the stuff that Councillor Faulkner was of those if we get.
You then just to throw some extras in. Everyone loves an objective. I had differentiated between the strategic objectives and the communications objectives, and this we probably don't need to go into this too much because I will rejig this with your advice around choosing 3 core ones. But here again, we have our objectives or outcomes that are of where we're going to head to get the outcomes we want: build awareness and understanding, build support for regional delivery, create a consistent narrative, and maximise visibility and advocacy. I would like to say the maximise visibility and advocacy, Councillor Moody, you'll be keen, your ears will perk up here, is also asking you. So this is about getting, obviously the comms team does a fantastic job in pushing out our message and engaging with our public and stakeholders, but as do you. And so it will also be about getting our councillors and working with you and supporting you as much as we can so that we can use your platforms and support you in getting this message out as well.
And I think the other thing that goes with that is we have a whole lot of staff who are experts in their field who we can also tap on to providing that narrative and that advocacy, well, not the advocacy, but the narrative of what they actually do, why it's important and how they do it. Councillor Mackenzie?
Well, just a question really about, have you got further notes behind your comment, build support for regional delivery?
Apologies, sorry, what was that?
Building support for regional delivery. Have you got more notes about fleshing out what you exactly mean by that statement?
I always have more notes, Councillor Mackenzie. Outcomes delivered at the appropriate scale, outcomes regional services delivery for communities, build territorial authority or stakeholder support for retaining appropriate regional capability and regional scale service delivery, regardless of the future governance arrangements, and demonstrate the long-term environmental, economic and community benefits of integrated regional decision making.
Yeah, so your notes give the nuance to that statement that we need, and that is because not everything we do needs regional delivery, and so I'm not into wordsmithing, but there you might say where it's appropriate.
Absolutely. If I may move on,
Yep.
I just aware of the time. I had promised you workshopping and discussion and all sorts, but we've had such great discussion. But one of the things I wanted to do as an activity, and I'm not sure we'll have time for now because I think I have 5 minutes left, but I'm keen to hear your opinions, is around the audience. And so I was going to ask you to hop into groups or couple or peers and give you one of these audiences each and do a think, feel, do. So, for example, if we had ministers up there, it might be think you want them to, so it's what you want them to think, feel or do, or what we as a council want them to think, feel or do. So if we had ministers, it might be we want them to think about regional functions and think that they matter. We want them to feel that Canterbury is constructive in this space, and what we want them to do is consider regional scale delivery and reform decisions. So this is a really important part, and one question I have...
This could be homework.
This could be homework.
We could provide homework to councillors because I think this is very important piece.
Okay, I will leave some paper then and count... Or maybe email.
Just an email. I think do an email and get feedback through an email. It's homework.
I do like the old school pen and paper, but I'll email you and ask for some feedback. Please do. This is really important for our communications planning, particularly around public, because we're not necessarily asking for an engagement here, i.e. asking for a call to action. It's more about awareness building. And I want particularly to know with if councillors support that.
Councillor Mackenzie and then Councillor Robinson.
Only just to make a very brief comment that there are some groups that are more influential than others, and I think they need to be targeted so that they understand the issues. And I've had a couple of meetings with some of them down just locally in Ashburton, and it's an interesting debate, parochialism versus a regional view, and having that discussion about where things may or may not sit. Now, some of those people are quite influential because of the organisations they belong to and the influence they might have with the local TA, and so it's those are the sort of people we need to be targeting for this.
Councillor Robinson.
I was just going to make a comment, because this, I think, is more important than what we've discussed so far. And had we had the audience aligned in the front end of this discussion, it would have been quite different, I think, how we perceived what we do and what we talk about. And I think it's really important the audience changes what we talk about for each audience. You know, if I went through youth Rupu to the university, they would expect some really direct, blunt commentary, or else they wouldn't listen. And so we need to have that too. This is what we do, this is what we need to still do, and this is what we expect the government to consider. We need it, because otherwise it's all fluffy around the edges. And yeah.
Councillor Moody.
Yep, so looks like we are running out of time for the workshop bit, so I'll just say my thoughts now. I observed that Selwyn, district councillors, some of them are writing about what the functions of regional councils are, and explaining that to their ratepayers and constituents, which is good they're thinking about that. But I know some people who have a really good understanding of regional council functions and what they are and what we do, and of course that's ourselves. And so I'm thinking one possible action is we can get that out, through perhaps there could be some work here for our core services leads and other leads within our council. And perhaps we could make some videos talking about this. Let's get it out there so that it gets into the eyeballs of our ratepayers, because the ratepayers are doing those surveys at the moment for the TAs, to inform their future structures and priorities. And this is a way that we can advocate for our functions and influence that future form. I think there's a real role for us here, and we'd be remiss not to be part of this public conversation.
Thank you, Councillor Moody. Do you want to finish us off?
I will. Thank you, Councillor Moody, and here is the actions that I promised with no minutes to go. So I just want to point out that you are already doing this. Everyone here, I've dealt with every single one of you, and many of you are doing various points on this action list here, and there are more things that we can support you to do. I would love for councillors to do what Councillor Moody just suggested then. It's a fantastic idea. I'll ensure that there are social media points that go into that non-urgent weekly email that you all receive, that I think about 7 of you open each week, just saying. So I will put social media in there. Have a look. Every week we put social media ideas in there for you to share. Create your own. More than happy to help you and give advice where I can, and more than happy to share what you create as well. Obviously, we have run out of time. Apologies to the next speaker, but very, very, we're here, we're keen to help, and we're very keen to make sure that we get your message out to Canterbury.
Thank you so much. I think this is an ongoing thing that we will work through, as well as our business as usual, or business as planned, I should say. Work that we have on our website about the stuff that the council does, and it's good to see that continuing as well. So thank you. Next up we have, I'll get the piece of paper so I get it right. We have a briefing nitrate drinking water notice of motion to recap the work to date, to answer the nitrate drinking water notice of motion ahead of the council decision paper in the future. We have Teflin and Fiona will be leading this briefing for us. Thank you very much, team. It's good to see you there, and I'm looking forward to seeing this briefing. I just want to say a welcome to some of our industry who are in the room, as well as Will from there. So looking forward to this briefing, and it's obviously really interested from a broad range of people, so it's good to get this information out.
Kia ora. Thank you, Chair. Morning, councillors. So, as the Chair has said, the purpose of this briefing is to go through where we want to get to in August for the council meeting. So there'll be a decision paper coming up there. So there were 3 parts to this notice of motion, and it'll be the 3rd part really that we wanted to be talking about in August. So what we want to do today is just spend a little bit of time just sort of recapping our work that we do in this space, and then moving us into the context of the decision piece that will be coming through in the August meeting. Obviously, there's no decisions today, so we're just looking for conversation and some guidance from you, and we'll be giving our advice as to where we've got to with the response to that part of the notice of motion. Chair, if it's all right with you, if we can do questions at the end, because I think it's quite useful if we can get the context of the paper in the August for the August meeting for those questions. So if that's okay, we'll go through our piece and then come back to the questions.
So go through the entire presentation and then have a conversation at the end.
Perfect. Thank you. So just to remind council, so in September we had this notice of motion. It had 3 parts to it regarding the nitrate emergency and the leadership role. The second part was to requesting that we brought back to the new council all of the information that we've got and the backstory, if you like, of the journey that we've been on as an organisation and the science. And so if you recall, we did that through December for the council, and we've obviously had another couple of briefings since then as well. So we're not going to dwell on all of the science, but what Fee and Cam are going to do is talk about what is our work in this space, what have we been doing, what is currently underway, and then we'll bring it down to that point 3 of this notice of motion, which is what we want to get some guidance on today from you. So I will hand over to Cam.
Thank you, Taff, and good morning, councillors. So I want to quickly go through a few context slides here, some of which we've already talked to you about when we've talked on this item previously, but starting off with our statutory responsibilities when it comes to nitrates in groundwater. So obviously we set limits through regional planning. You'll be very aware of that, regulate land use activities and farming, and DWPZ, so it's drinking water protection zones. So having particular rules that apply within drinking water protection zones that sit around community drinking water supplies. We obviously monitor and report on water quality, and it's a big part of our science work, obviously. Making decisions on discharges of contaminants to land, air and water, compliance monitoring of consented activities, and importantly informing community drinking water suppliers of any known risks or hazards. And our efforts have really been focused, obviously, in that space. And when we think about the regional, sub-regional plans that we've created over the past 15, 16 years, a lot of that giving effect to the outcomes that were identified through the Canterbury Water Management Strategy, setting limits, a huge amount of work with industry in the development of good management practices, farm environment plans, which you heard about recently, and the auditing associated with those, state of the environment monitoring and reporting, which we continue to do, and supporting the significant efforts of landowners, industry and others to really focus on reducing contaminants into groundwater. So there's a huge body of work in there that can't be underplayed. So that brings us to more recent focus, and we've been focusing a lot of the work through the Drinking Water Action Plan. And so this encompasses both existing and new work that we've been undertaking. We'll talk to some of this today. There are 14 points within the action plan, and this came to the Regional Delivery Committee in September of last year, and broadly covering 4 different areas. So first of all, working with landowners to reduce contaminant losses. So that's something that we already do, but we've had a heightened focus on that as well recently. Strengthening the evidence base, and Fee will talk to some of that. Engaging with domestic self-suppliers, and we're also going to talk to that today, and importantly, working with others. So working with landowners, I'm going to cover each of those 4 areas in a few slides. So we obviously do compliance monitoring of consented activities, around 40 prioritised drinking water, community drinking water supplies. This is reported through to you, but it's actually a service level measure. And so it's one of the targeted areas that we report through to you as part of a service level measure from our compliance function that talks about, are we seeing an increase in compliance through our activities? So that's really important. We're also have land management advisors promoting best farming practices that go beyond compliance, and this is a really important bit of work as well. And over the past 12 months, I've been visiting landowners close to 9 prioritised community and school suppliers, building relationships and trust with those landowners. Promoting understanding with landowners that land use activities upstream can impact downstream community and school water supplies. So this is there's a little bit of a nuance here because we have drinking water protection zones across Canterbury, and this is actually about working upstream of those to make sure that landowners that sit outside of the drinking water protection zone still know that their activities might impact on the quality of water within those drinking water zones. And also conversations focus on education, raising awareness of water quality concerns and the potential mitigations. And they've been really productive visits. We've had a lot of, it's been telling, we've found a lack of understanding, so it's been really good to build that awareness, but also a lot of engaging landowners keen to see a difference made.
Morena koutou. So moving into the aspect of our Drinking Water Action Plan that talks about strengthening the evidence base. Today I want to focus on particularly one of the studies that we've recently had done by the New Zealand Institute for Public Health and Forensic Science. So we commissioned some work from them to do a desktop exercise to understand potentially how many households or how many self-supplies are there across the region. And they, through that study, which did exclude Banks Peninsula, they've identified around about 20,000 domestic self-supplies. And I'm not going to go into the detail of how that was done here, but I'm happy to share that report with you. I'll send that round to folks if you would like to look into that detail. What we've done with that information from PHF Science is overlay it with information that we have on the concentration of nitrate in groundwater across the region. And that's how we come up with a figure here that suggests that there are more than 500 domestic self-supplies in areas where past sampling in Environment Canterbury wells has shown nitrate concentrations in groundwater above the drinking water standard. And so that in New Zealand, for nitrate nitrogen, is a concentration of 11.3 milligrams per litre. There are also more than 7,000 self-suppliers in areas where nitrate concentrations have been above 5.65 milligrams per litre. And when we think about understanding water quality across the region, it's important to remember that there are both chemical and microbial contaminants that can cause issues relating to human health. So we have also worked to get some survey information to try to understand people's testing regime, whether or not they test their self-supplies and whether or not they have any treatment in place. And so PHF Science did a survey with some Burnham pilot study participants. For those of you who were here in the last term of council, you might remember that we did a study in the Burnham region that was in response to the previous notice of motion in relation to nitrate. So we wanted to understand concentrations of nitrate in people's groundwater who were on a self-supply in a small part of Canterbury. So PHF Science identified 16 potential respondents for that study, and we received responses from 15. So they're pretty engaged. Through that earlier engagement and study, they have what we believe is a slightly greater awareness of issues in their area. We've also been working with irrigation schemes because they themselves have a keen interest in understanding water quality in their scheme area. Their stakeholders are very engaged and obviously taking actions on farm to minimise leaching losses in the first place. They understand lag times, and they were happy to survey their shareholders with the same kinds of questions to understand what they know about their water quality and whether they have treatment in place. And so for all of those folks who were surveyed, we're looking at people who are using groundwater as their predominant source of drinking water. Now, the survey has generated a few insights here. I won't go through all of these on the screen, but it's important to note that the results show testing is largely infrequent across participants. They don't typically seem to have a routine testing regime in place. Around a third to a half of the respondents have had their private self-supplies tested within the past 3 years, both looking at biological as well as chemical contaminants. But for many, they didn't necessarily understand the results that well, and so there was some uncertainty into what actions they might take next. I think the important point to note here is really that if people test their water and have the information, then with a bit of support and guidance and making sure that insights are available for them to consider what options they may take, they can then make their own decisions about what to do next. So there was generally low uptake of treatment systems. For some, they didn't consider it to be necessary. For others, they looked at their testing results and, based on the figures reported, made a deliberate choice that that was not necessary. For those who did have treatment systems in place, they weren't necessarily well maintained. Some did have a maintenance routine occasionally. For others, they only went down that path when the system didn't seem to be working as intended. And in many cases, the treatment systems installed were to treat for E. coli rather than for nitrate. So I think the insight really through this work is that there are opportunities to improve people's awareness and understanding of the importance of testing their water supplies. It's then up to them to decide what action they take next.
And that last point really segues well into the slide, in which we've been doing some focused work around how we do support information and awareness with domestic self-suppliers, so with households relying on their own drinking water supply. So we've had campaigns through social media, online and print outlets, and we've had a real focus on reviewing the information that we have available and improving that where possible. So we have information around community drinking water protection zones, which I talked to earlier, and some of the campaigns around get your household water from a private well, because if so, you should be understanding the source water and if you need to be testing and treating. Have you checked your bore lately to make sure it is secure? What happens to your wastewater? And when was your septic tank last checked? Because of course, septic tanks are a risk factor for drinking water supplies. And of course, we continue to work with others. So we have some roles and responsibilities in the space, but so do many others. And so we've talked to you previously around the work that we've done with the Water Services Authority, Taumata Arawai, but also Te Whatu Ora, the territorial authorities. We've previously talked to you around the agricultural sector strategic leadership group work and the irrigation schemes as well, which Fee talked to in the work that we've been doing through the survey work. So that brings us to point 3 of the notice of motion. And so you'll remember in the previous council in September of last year requested advice on the indicative cost to drinking water suppliers and private well owners of treating nitrate-enriched groundwater or finding alternative low nitrate sources and considers options to reallocate costs. And so the work that we've been doing, particularly around building the evidence base, really helps us to start answering this question, and that's what we want to talk to you about today. So just wanted to bring to you a few case studies, and this is all public information that we've gathered online. So this just talks to some of the costs associated with some of treatment associated with community supplies. And so there's some work happening in Ashburton. You're very familiar with Lower Waihau and the challenges that they had down there. But there's also an example from Tynwald as well, also in Ashburton. And then, so that was community supplies and costs of treating. This slide talks to costs of treating for domestic self-suppliers. So again, households that are relying on their own private supply. And costs vary according to what you're testing or what you're treating for, but also the form of treatment device that you're having in your home. Is it just for your kitchen sink or is it for the whole house? And so reverse osmosis or ion exchange is focused on removing nitrate from drinking water. And cost 3,000 to 5,000 for the whole house, 1,000 to 2,000 for under sink systems, and then UV treatment effective for treating microorganisms, for example E. coli, can be up to 2,000 for whole of house or 500 for under the sink. Building on the work that Fee talked about, PHF Science estimated over 7,500 domestic self-suppliers are in areas where past sampling has shown nitrate levels in groundwater above MAV or half MAV. But it's really important to note that, PHF also estimated that 20,000 domestic self-suppliers in Canterbury, all of those households, regardless of where they are, should be taking steps to ensure that their water is safe to drink, whether it be sourcing water from groundwater, from surface water, or from the roof. So that's just an important case to make there. So just make sure this one is me as well. What does all this work show? We know there's obviously a significant number of households on private supplies in Canterbury. That's the $20,000 number. Small surveys that Fiona talked to showed only low to moderate uptake of testing and treating. However, there are multiple reasons why households may not be testing and or treating. Low levels of awareness about how to keep drinking water safe is a key barrier to making informed decisions. And this applies across all contaminants, so chemical, such as nitrate, and microbial, such as E. coli. Increasing awareness is critical if domestic self-suppliers are to keep their drinking water safe. Yeah. And I wanted to quickly talk about the role that Water Services Authority Taumata Arawai have in this space. So we've talked about the role that we play from a groundwater perspective. The Water Services Authority has a key objective to protect and promote drinking water safety and related public health outcomes in their legislation. But they also include a new function that was included within the legislation in August of last year to facilitate, promote, provide or support education and training for domestic self-suppliers. So that's really around that building awareness. And importantly, they recommend that domestic self-suppliers, so those households, learn about the properties of their source water, endpoint treatment to make it safe, maintaining an endpoint treatment system, because that's equally important. Make sure you are treating that system to make sure it works effectively, and also to be regularly testing their water. And importantly, again, that advice applies across all contaminants and all forms of self-supply.
Thanks, Cam. So this brings us to where we are today in terms of that third part of the notice of motion. So what we've had is the information that we've gathered. It is indicative, as Fee and Cam both said, but it's giving us a sense of where we might be. And the point of the August paper is now what is the decision from council as to where do you want to go, given that indicative information. So what we've got up here is just some thoughts that council might want to consider when going forward to this August meeting. So we've got a clear statutory responsibility and we are delivering to that. We've under the survey results, as I say, indicative as they are, we have got a sense that there's a clear challenge around lifting awareness and understanding. Taumata Arawai has a role to play, and council could consider whether we support that role or leave that to them. We do know that they're doing some work on their own awareness, but in the meantime, we've identified that there's a gap here in Canterbury. There is less clear rationale for exploring funding options at this time. We did hear that there is awareness in some places, less around the cost came out, but again, those are the considerations because this last part of the NOM is really about funding options. The reform obviously poses a challenge around whether the council wants to commit to new discretionary long-term programs, or how you want to respond given where we are now. And obviously you've had previous conversations yourselves when we've brought back information to you since you started as a council, and you've had those conversations yourselves to get information around nitrates, and also to discuss whereabouts you'd like to be on the spectrum of work, if you like, that you could lean into. So where that leads us to August for the paper. So we will put some of this context piece into that paper that'll come back. So some of the things that we've covered already, just so that there is on the public record, and part of that decision making is the reminder around the work that we do and the good work that's been going on for well over a decade now with industry, and action being taken to prevent the nitrates getting into the groundwater in the first place. But recognising, as we do as a council, I know you're all well aware that there is this lag issue and there's this current state that we're looking at. So we will be looking to resolve the notice of motion as and when we can, through whatever direction you give us at that meeting. And so really where we want to head with that August meeting is, where do we go next with this? So we've identified from the indicative survey work that there is that awareness. Now we could lean into that more, and you could ask us as a council to do more in that space, particularly as Taumata Arawai starts to pick up their role in that space around private supplies. And then there is the question around the funding, is how much into that do you want us to go? Because we do have indicative information. If you want us to move into that space in time for the long-term plan, then we would need direction from you to now pick up some more in-depth work to determine what that may or may not look like and what those different funding levers might be. So with that, we're obviously very happy to take questions on anything at all, but we could perhaps take some offline if there are other questions around the detail of the work that we do and some of the science. And if we could take some questions or comments on where we're heading in August, that would be very helpful for us. Thanks, Chair.
Okay, so I've got questions. I'll go with Councillor Robinson first, and then if people can just put their hand up who has questions. So just Councillor Robinson and Davis and Scott at the moment.
No, thanks for this. Feels like I've been waiting a little while for it, but that's okay. So just looking back at the work stream to date, so that notice of motion had clear, defined timelines for this program. And I think it was January or February, we received an update on, risk maps and some of the data. That has since had elements missing in there and was meant to be brought back to us, and it's not even in this set. I'm not going to lie, that makes me feel a little bit concerned, because I expected this detail in order to move to the next bit. And so I'm assuming, my question is, will that be in August for the decision? Because without that information, I can just look at the annual survey from 2024, and that alone feeds into more than this. I can't make a decision on what we're looking at without that data, and taking it offline feels a little bit concerning for me. I'm sorry. This is public issue, public meeting. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Robinson. The information that we brought back to you earlier this year about the maps, we received quite a bit of feedback and discussion at that time, and we've taken that into consideration and are working to finalise an updated version. What we've focused on today is really to hone in on that point 3 of the notice of motion, which is about having a conversation about what council might like to choose in terms of whether there are funding mechanisms explored. I completely understand that you're interested in having the baseline information. What I can say, in the period before those maps are brought back, the information that is available in the existing maps, the existing information you have about nitrate concentrations in groundwater is absolutely valid, and what will come back is not different very much at all. It is an update with the most recent data available over the period from 2020 to 2025.
So the reason I say that is because, I mean, risk maps are one thing, but we've identified here Ashburton schools. That concerns me. And there's no data or detail into what we found there, which would feed into the decision of whether or not we need to really be proactive. And I just would like to know if it was, is it something in the area that's feeding into this, or is this an unusual thing, or is it showing a trend that is going up and we need to do a little bit more of a deep dive? The reason I say that is we're moving into part 3 of the notice of motion without having the detail of part 2. It hasn't been fed into, so I'm wondering if that could be given at some stage.
So we did have some information brought back on part 2. I think it was in December last year. I'll have to check that. So happy to have a further discussion, but from my perspective, that's been covered off, and we're not going into a deep dive of location-specific studies here. What we're providing is a regional scale information on known concentrations of nitrate in groundwater.
So, sorry, can I just add one point there? Just on the point, we're absolutely being proactive in the way in which our land management advisors and compliance staff working within those compliance within those drinking water protection zones, but also outside those protection zones. Those Ashburton schools, like the other examples up there, sit within drinking water protection zones. So we've got a compliance focus within those, and we've got a number of staff working outside of those zones to support landowners and better land use and management decisions.
Okay, so I've got a good list. I've got Councillor Davis, then Councillor Megan Mackay, then Councillor Moody, Gerard, Claire Mackay, Mackenzie, and Scott.
Everyone's chipping in. Okay.
I can take Claire Mackay.
Very happy to hear that we have pounced on that protecting the public drinking water supplies. I'm very happy about that. I do want to know how many of those households have hit on our campaign for awareness. Have we got numbers on who we've reached and how many people we've reached?
We can certainly get those for you. So when we do the awareness campaigns, we do mostly do them online, so we can get you some analytics. Yep.
Cool. Because I did the maths on the 20,000 households, and if we really wanted to make it clean and clear, E. coli included, it's a big number. It's $100 million for 20,000 households, really. So that's my main question is there a way we can glue together Te Mata Arawai, the TAs, Fata Ora, and us to work on this? I know, but like really have a plan on that.
In terms of the awareness, we do already work with the TAs. So we've produced some material which we've shared with them. Te Mata Arawai are now producing their own material now. They're gearing up for those private supplies as well. So we are definitely talking to them. So it is all the same information. So although we can measure hits to ours, we obviously can't measure hits to theirs. So there are multiple agencies saying the same thing and putting campaigns out with the same information around responsibility, private well owners. And to reiterate what Cam said and what you've just said, it's not just about nitrates. It is keeping drinking water safe, because E. coli is probably more of an immediate problem as well for people. So,
Councillor Davis, I think might be useful, Simon Tapp, if you can give us an intention on what we're trying to do for the 5th of August. If you could come up and just say what we're trying to do for that day on the 5th, if that's okay, because that might answer a piece of the question, because those questions might be useful after what you hear from Simon.
Certainly, thank you, Chair. And through you, we are on the 5th of August attempting to, and this is obviously pending confirmation from all parties, arrange 3 external speakers on this matter, Te Mata Arawai, Te Whatu Ora, and Greenpeace Aotearoa, who've all expressed interest in and are working with us on this matter. Thank you.
The TAs.
That's something. That's another lens that we can't get at this point in time, but it'd be really useful for that type of question to hold that for that day, because I think asking those groups, especially Te Whatuora and Te Mata Arawai, what the linkages will be, and then obviously relay that TA perspective and what we're doing into that would be quite useful. So I think hold that question, and if we can land that for the 5th of August, it'll be a good question to ask. Thanks, Simon. Councillor Mackay, Megan.
Kia ora. Well, thank you for the presentation. You asked for some feedback, so I thought I would provide my feedback and guidance. I don't see that these numbers 1, 2, and 3 are linear, and I think they can occur concurrently. So I don't need 2 before making a decision on 3. As a councillor just for this term, I've really focused on trying to get a better understanding of Environment Canterbury's legal responsibilities and the limits of our mandate in this space, and areas where we could choose to go a bit further. And I do think that there are circumstances in which council might act beyond the strict legal minimum, but where there's wider community, public health or moral considerations that we need to take into account. But where we do that, it should be done in a conscious governance decision, supported by clear advice on legal authority, on financial implications and institutional risk. And if I apply that approach and that lens to this notice of motion, then I do not support any further work on treatment funding or financing models at this stage. Because in my view, that would move council further into a discretionary area where our role is less clear and where the legal, financial and equity implications would require considerable more work. So instead, what I would prefer is for council to concentrate its efforts on our mandate and ability to influence outcomes where we are strongest. And for me, that would be looking at source protection and targeted compliance, monitoring and science and risk mapping. The piece that we've been doing on leadership and coordination with the agencies and the sectors that hold other parts of the response. Future planning and advocacy work, and I think that's really important as we're looking through the new RMA reform and the environmental chapters, and our ability to influence national policy and funding settings. And this does not mean, from my perspective, that we have a lesser response to nitrate. It's just a more disciplined one, and it's one that will focus council on preventing further contamination and understanding where the risk is the greatest, and ability to use the regulatory tools that we have at our hands and influence others where they have responsibility. So for that reason, what I'd like to see, or what I will be supporting at the August paper, would be to change, to not focus on that funding model, but it'll be helpful to really understand, to distinguish before then, or bring to that paper any proposals of what is discretionary work and what is not. That would be really helpful to make the line clear for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Megan. Really appreciate that. Councillor Moody.
Yeah, I'll just see if I can share my screen here. Can you all see that slide now? So, can you see that there, Chair?
Yes.
Yeah, so this was a briefing from December last year. One of our nitrate briefings from staff include this slide about work underway around evaluating the effectiveness and efficiency of our rules, and it said that council will see the work early next year, as in 2026, and that it's foundational work, to determine what we'll need to focus on in the next round of planning, and if our rules are working. And we're into our next round of planning now, and we still haven't got this information. It's now forecast to come this December, a year later. And so I think, given that it's foundational, we need to get this information before we move to any decision on this matter, as per what staff have said here, that it is foundational work that's needed to focus on. So, my question is, are we going to get this information before we need to make this decision at the future meeting?
We've got Amy has come to the table to answer that.
Hopefully that's not too much of a surprise. I think Stephanie would expect me to.
You can unshare your slide now, screen now, Councillor Moody, please.
So, Councillor Moody, you are indeed correct. That that refers to the Section 35 work. We have come back to council and provided general direction from the outcome of that work. I think that was, I would have to check the number of weeks, but Lisa and her team gave a general overview, and she shared some early findings. I have been checking with my team over the past couple of days around when exactly the date is for the Section 35 work to come to council. It is that the draft is largely finished, but it hasn't gone through our internal processes. So Stephanie hasn't seen it. Taflin as Director Comms, for example. So hoping to bring that to ELT in the next few weeks and then get that to you. So I'm sorry I can't be more definitive, but it is imminent, and if it may not be before the next briefing, but it will be in the weeks surrounding that.
A question from Councillor Campbell, Councillor Moody, a question from Councillor Campbell in her absence, and she is at another thing at the moment. We're watching this briefing back from the recording, is that she has asked around that Section 35 work, do you believe council can make a decision on this matter in the absence of that information? There was just an information. Does that information flow into the decisions that we need to make around that, or is this something that can be made as a decision without that information being in front of us first? That was a question from her.
Yes, and so unfortunately, Councillor Campbell asked about Section 32, which was in the resolutions, which is with regard to Plan Change 8.
Yeah, it's a Section 35 work.
Yes, it is. I don't want you to think I didn't answer her question. I asked her question as asked, but we also did. That's why I can answer with confidence around Section 35, because I do know that that work is near finished. My view on whether we can make a decision on, I would have to think about that. As I said, I'd like to defer. I could.
Oh, sorry. Cut you off.
Do you wanna? Have you got something to say, Taff?
On this one, in my view, yes, we could answer that question, and I think that's what we want to bring back to council is, as Councillor Megan Mackay has said, around what is discretionary, how far out from that do you want us to go in terms of doing more exploratory work in time for the LTP. So you wouldn't be making if you instructed us to go ahead and do more work, you wouldn't be making a decision on pulling funding levers, and you would have that other information by the time you got that far, but you would be instructing us whether you wanted us to go into that space at all. And I think you can do that without the Section 35 work.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. So, staff have acknowledged this information is vital to our planning. I believe we need it now, or at least very soon. And thank you for saying that will be happening. And we shouldn't be making any further decisions until we get it and have time to absorb it.
That's not what was just said, Councillor Moody. That's kind of the opposite to what the staff advice just was.
To clarify.
Well, no decisions about nitrates are so important that they need to be taken before we have this information. Thank you.
To clarify what I think Taff and I said, and I did throw to my because decision answered the decision versus me. The answer was, can I confirm that we have presented the general direction of the rules to council? Publishing a specific detailed report, which is multiple pages, is an internal
process. So, and that takes a bit more of a nuance and consideration. The general findings we have already presented to you and will be sufficient to make the decision as Taffin has just said.
Thank you, Amy.
Yeah, and it would need to be what our rules are and how well we do them would also need to be considered with the actual question at hand.
And in the context of us not being able to plan changes at the moment, then we've got another angle to this, which is just extra complication on planning in general in the future. So it's good to get the information. I'll take advice on, well, there will be some further advice that will come through, I imagine, from the paper. But Peter, you didn't want to? Okay, so Councillor Gerard.
Yeah, so much of it's just been covered that I was going to ask about on behalf of Councillor Campbell. So I'll go on to maybe a question I may have. When they're testing for their water, domestic supplies for water testing, they'll be doing E. coli protozoa as well in that test So could that information be also coordinated with Whataora, with the looking at the ecology of the aquifer, so that we get more information about the health of our groundwater ecosystem as well. So it's sort of bringing the science into, because we're actually doing some monitoring at the same time. Just a random question.
Thank you, Councillor Gerard. So as you're very well aware, we have a network of monitoring wells across the region, and we provide updates on an annual groundwater quality survey each year, and those results capture both the nitrate concentrations as well as looking at E. coli. So we can provide a regional picture on an annual basis, and I can share with you some of those past surveys if that would be helpful.
So you. I've got, is there anything else there? Okay, so I've got Councillor Mackenzie Ward Faulkner Robinson.
I'm going to make more of a comment, really, and this whole thing frustrates me because it's more of a political campaign than it is actually something led by science, and that frustrates me. And I'll make my point. I think the surveys overstate the issue by my observation and my conversations with the people I represent in Ashburton and so on. And I know for a fact, because of the quite a lot of detailed well testing that happens in our area, that even in areas which are mapped as being at high risk, there's a lot of domestic bores that actually have low nitrates within that area, and because deep bores tend to have much lower nitrates than shallow bores, and so it depends on whether the households have deepened their bores, which a lot of people have done over the last few years. So, and my observation, talking to again my constituents, is that most people understand the standard, the level at which their bores are supplying nitrates, and given that there's fluctuations during the season and during the year, and from year to year, depending on rainfall events and things like that. So I think you need to get that into balance. I think there's also a frustration, certainly down our way, that some of the catchment interventions that we've been trying to do as a community have been frustrated and disrupted by this council, which seems particularly frustrating when we know there are legacy issues with nitrates, and the Tynwald plume is quite a significantly aged nitrate plume there, which we've known about for a long time. We had a gallery specifically designed to put low nitrate water into the hopefully into the stream that feeds the Tynwald supply bore, and that was shut down for 3 years by this council because they didn't give us continuance. Now that was this council was corrected by the hearings commissioner who said that should never have happened. That was inappropriate. But I also the above Winslow lowers the nitrates there for the village of Winslow, which there's about 20 houses, from quite high levels, 8 to 9 parts per million, down to 3 to 4 parts per million. And so that was shut down for 3 years as well. So we've got a community who understands the issues, trying to work towards coming up with solutions. But we're playing politics with some of the solutions, and B, with some of the messages we send out to the community. Just last October, we all faced an election, and Greenpeace ran a pretty unpleasant campaign around nitrates for those of us who are rural councillors. John and I think probably because we represent Selwyn and Ashburton, were perhaps more exposed to that than other councillors. But we were both elected not by thin majorities, but we were the first and third highest polling candidates for the regional election. So if I use that as a bit of a survey on nitrates and what our communities actually genuinely think, then as a rural councillor, I think I've got a better understanding of what's going on. And my frustration with the politics of this is it seems to be coming out of Christchurch rather than actually driven by the people in the communities I represent. And that upsets me, I have to say. And I think it upsets a lot of my constituents, and we need to think about that.
Councillor Ward.
Well,
and it's not just rural constituents either. I think everybody does care about this issue. Councillor Ward.
Yep, I do care about it. And as most of you know in this room, I am an ex-farmer. But in my farming career, I did a lot to mitigate nitrogen, from soil testing every hectare on my farm every year, to applying all my fertiliser at variable rate, to putting all my water on variable rate, testing my wells every year at a cost of around $100 per well because I was supplying food into the food chain. And so as part of our QA program, that was a standard procedure. So well testing is not an expensive, I don't think. I think now I just looked up on Hills Laboratories, a full test is $169 to $200. I don't think that's a huge expense to know that your family is drinking safe water. And that's where I was a wee bit disturbed last year when some councillors around this table thought that we should be paying for that as ratepayers. I think it's a big cost in the scheme. If you get a good test back, then you won't be $3,000 to $5,000 on a filtration system, which, you know, I don't think everyone in Canada has one of those. And I am a Megan's concerns about about the mandate and that forward, and I just think that we need to look at it from the big picture. And the rural, as Ian has alluded to, and I don't want to go on about it. Our rural constituency, they're really angry about this, and as Ian has alluded to, it's a political stance. I was doing all those things on my property, yet I was perceived to be an environmental villain in the last election by Greenpeace, and I'll leave it at that. Okay,
Councillor Faulkner, can we just avoid naming specific organisations or people? I think it's not very helpful. Yes. Well, it's a council briefing. It's not a council meeting, so people can sort of share their views and share thoughts as well. But
right. Well, the staff at the table.
Do you want to?
I just remind everyone that the staff are providing a response to a notice of motion. Notices of motion are a political matter, but the staff are not providing a political response. They are providing you with the advice that you have sought, and if you could keep them, please, in that safe space, I would very much appreciate it.
So, Councillor Faulkner, and then Sunkel, then Robinson, then Scott.
Yeah, thank you for that. And one of the things that I'm looking at is and it's part of the conversation that we've had. I'm specifically looking at number 3 there, and being a first-term councillor, I'm still in catch-up mode to a certain extent on this issue, but there's some of the wording there considers options to reallocate costs. And then later on, there's other mechanism. And in the conversation that when this was put to council and the motion accepted, what did that actually mean? Can you help me out on that? Because other mechanism seems to indicate quite a broad alternative approach.
Thank you for the question. And obviously that when the notice of motion comes in, staff also have to do that interpretation. And so it's a good time to sort of mention that's exactly what we want to be looking at. So the notice of motion says that council considers options to reallocate costs and those other mechanisms. So that's really where we're heading for the August meeting, is a decision from you to say how much do you want us to bring back so that you can do that, or does this council not want to consider costs or any other mechanisms, because there is a bit of work in there for us to then unpack and to commission work to probably an external at cost to get some work done to go, what are the mechanisms, what is possible in this space within your statutory remit as a council. So that's exactly where we're heading with that.
Okay, so that takes me immediately to where the effort have been focused up to date, and with the farm environment plans, good management practices, and the information that we've been getting from some of the irrigation companies, and is that part of the process where that data could get integrated so we have a clearer picture, which leads back to number two, because in a lot of ways I agree with Councillor Megan Mackay's comments.
Councillor Sunkel.
Thank you. Where do we focus? And I guess my frustration is that we are focusing on trying to remedy something at the under the sink of a house, when our real concentration should be on how do we alleviate the problem in a macro sense across the Canterbury Plains. And that for me is the Canterbury Water Management Strategy, something that a number of us have been involved in now for nearly 20 years. And we are, if we understand the science correctly, starting to see that final tip-off in turn and reduction of those nitrate levels that are being seen within our communities due to the actions that are being taken on land. We talked about what was in the post. We understand those legacy issues, and we understand that time will be taken before we start to see those fall-offs, but we are starting to see it. So I guess there's a frustration for me, this conversation, as opposed to how do we further drive the conversation to further reduce the losses to the receiving environment, which will again in time reduce. We can throw out banners about banning different animals and cows and production systems, but the science actually tells us the real answers there. So how much cost do we want to put into this paper and this motion? For me, none. I really want to continue to drive the outcomes that we are starting to see through the CWMS. We have data that's now coming in from our schemes, from all those other providers of information. We have some really good independent science out there starting to analyse what is going on and showing us that finally we're starting to see what we all want to achieve and have been working for close to 20 years. So for me, yeah, yes, we need to do what we need to do, but I think we still need to really concentrate on ensuring to reduce the losses to the receiving environment within our communities, celebrate the gains that we are making, pat our communities on the back and say you are getting there, you are achieving outcomes. We don't need to take our foot off the pedal, but we do need to recognise what is being achieved, but reiterate what needs to be achieved into the future.
Councillor Robinson.
Just having some time to reflect. And I know this is science informed, so yeah, with regards to 3, And it's the key bracketed comment there, nitrate receivers. And I think that's the key here, is that we're considering this for those people who are receiving nitrates in their wells for no fault of their own. And I think that is where we need to define the schools, you know, the people that actually don't contribute to the activity that may or may not contribute to that. And I do think we have a duty to them. And yeah, I just think we do. And actually, Councillor Southworth, who actually fed me a little bit of just a background of what she's been doing in the background regarding the costs of some of these systems, is actually well and truly well below what we consider even 12 months ago. We can actually get systems in place for, you know, less than $500 for some people. And I just think it's disingenuous to not consider something for those people who through no are receiving substandard water. Especially the school thing is sitting. How do they pay for it? And they haven't done anything. And I guess my big concern too is moving forward, if groundwater is potentially at the point that we can no longer drink it, even at depth, then that's alpine water or, you know, fresh surface water. Yeah, I don't know. I think that's probably the best option.
Thank you,
clearly,
Councillor Robinson.
yeah.
We've got a couple of minutes, only 2 minutes left. We've got 4 people that want to make some comments. So I'll go to Councillor Lamont because you haven't said anything yet.
Thank you.
You're at the end.
I've just have been listening with interest to this very important conversation. And in my head, my summary is we've had this notice of motion raised. There were a number of things that came from that, a number of activities. There was research, there was engagement with people, with organisations, with corporations. We're now at a time that we need to consider what else we need to do and where the future responsibilities sit. I think we work within the legislation, but there's also a moral context to this. Where are we now? Have we met our responsibilities, and what are the next steps? We will be moving forward. You can't stay in a situation of stasis forever. We need to now move forward and just feel a degree of comfort that what we have done will move us forward.
Thank you, Councillor Gerard.
Yes, just clarification on the why I was asking about the protozoa and bacteria is really the importance of our groundwater ecology for the cleansing of our water that does go into our deep aquifers eventually. So it's all connected, and we've got to look after our future generations. So, but I want to go back to the Canterbury Water Management Strategy and really look at that as far as that was our contract to our communities for enabling our water to be used for irrigation, which enabled intensification of land use on the Canterbury Plains. So that was the contract that we had, and it was urban and rural, and we came together and developed that. So I think, yeah, let's have a look at that again and just peer over it as councillors, all of us, and just to make sure that they're holding up.
Thank you, Councillor Scott.
Unfortunately, I left my soapbox at home, so I'm not going to go on that.
There is soap in the other room if you need it.
Yeah, I'm sure there's a heap of them out there somewhere. Look, I've got a question actually. You'll be excited to hear. So I'm just wondering whether there's a gap here somewhere. I know over in the Waimakariri districts, it's between 4,000 and 6,000 lifestyle blocks, and most of those have possibly got their own well. I just put down a private well not long ago. It cost me $4,000. It produces 2 litres a second, which is more than I require, but there's no requirement for me to report on that to anyone or do anything. That's in my own private space. So I'm just wondering, with those things, and working with TAs, whether the use of a private well should sit on a LIM report. Because the reason I'm saying that is if the use of a private well is on a LIM report, when a property changes ownership, there's an inherent understanding that that's there, and there should be some advice on that in terms of water testing, all those other things. We've got no mechanism to pick that up. We're about to disappear. I don't think there's going to be anyone left in our space to do that. And can I just say at the end of it, so that's my question is that, can I just say I thought that Councillor Mackay and Councillor Sunkel have summed up my position pretty well.
Thank you so much, staff. Do you have anything you wanted to respond to Councillor Scott on his question?
Not to Councillor Scott, but I just wanted to comment for Councillor Robinson's benefit that Taumata Arawai have been working with the schools in Ashburton, and it's my understanding that they have safe drinking water.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Taff.
Sorry, I just wanted to very quickly recap. So some of the things that we've also agreed that we will do. So the analytics of the awareness campaign, which I think would be quite helpful for you to know going into the meeting. We'll also share back the links to all of the information that we did for part 2 up here of the notice of motion. I think that might be helpful for councillors to be able to recap on that if you wanted to ahead of that meeting, and the PHF report that Fiona talked about. But yeah, thank you. We've got a really good steer in terms of the advice that you need back around the legal and other considerations of what is statutory and then what goes beyond that. So that's very helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. And it's really, did you have a question, Andrea? Okay, you can ask it, because I mean, we've got only lunch now, so.
Okay. I just wanted to know from Fiona, because we've sort of touched on, there's a lot of data out there. It's not our data, but it is out there. Would you like more data? I mean, do you think that more data would help this? Or do we know? Because we do know that things are reducing. So, it's the known unknown we're dealing with.
Thank you very much for your question. And when you ask a scientist if they'd like more data, they're always going to say, yeah, absolutely.
Like asking
we love
surgeon
data.
if he wants to cut.
But in this context, I'm very comfortable with the data that we have available. And when, to Councillor Sunkel's point, there's some excellent work that has been done to try to understand, to disentangle climate and seasonal effects from nitrate concentrations in groundwater, looking at trends and trying to predict when things might change, when we start to detect change. There's a lot that goes into that work in terms of the frequency of your monitoring. There are many factors that influence that kind of detection power, if you like. And so in terms of the information that we can provide to inform your decision making, I'm very comfortable with the extensive monitoring that we have through our Environment Canterbury monitoring network. There is fantastic data available, collected, invested in, and collected by Papatapu Runanga and their entities, by irrigation schemes, by NGOs. There's a raft of data out there. What we are focused on providing to you is the data that we have in-house. If there are opportunities to engage with others, to bring data in, we are absolutely open to that. It sounds straightforward, but it's actually quite challenging. So I'm confident that what we're presenting to you is suitable for your decision making.
Yeah, great question. Thank you again. I appreciate it. This is it is a hot topic, and it will continue to always be a hot topic. And as you know, I appreciate that there's questions and also statements and views around the table, and it's important to get those out and to hear those. I too was one of those ones that was given a hard time over the election, but I composted that, put it in the ground. I'm looking forward at what we can do and what we've got in front of us, and I hope everybody can do that, including the people that are looking and trying to find how we're dealing with this, because I think there are opportunities out of what we're doing here to help whatever comes next, to make sure that we don't lose sight of some of these things that are happening, because we are in a plan stop environment at the moment. So gathering this information so that when we can, or whoever can plan, to make sure that whatever we know is not working can work in the future, and that's where that next step, Section 35 work, will come be important as well. It's not just that. There's also the stuff that Councillor Gerard was talking about. There's a whole lot of things there. So thank you so much. We'll break now. Well, we're actually finished for the day. So it was actually Councillor Moody, you were doing the karakia for the closing, but you're not in the room. Do you want to do it, or should I just do it? Okay, I'll do it.
You go for it. Thanks, Chair.
Okay, I'll do it. Unuhia. Unuhia ki te urutapu nui, kia wātea ke māma te nākau te tinana te wairoa i te aratakatu. Koia rā urunga, whakakaia rā urunga, kia tina, humie, huie, tae ki e.